Out of the previous 14 clashes between the Parramatta Eels and the Penrith Panthers, the Blue and Golds had only won on 5 occasions. They hadn't beaten Penrith in Penrith since 2019. And this is kind of the way the two sides have long faced off ever since Penrith entered the competition in 1967. It's rare that both teams are playing good football at the same time. If we go back to the 1970s, and while the Panthers were turning over their 10th year in the Premiership, the Eels began a period of domination over their Western Sydney rivals. From 1977 to 1987, the two sides played 32 times, with Penrith only managing 7 wins. Then, as the Eels slowly dropped off their pedestal, things evened out slightly. In their 16 games from 1988 to 1996, Penrith won 10 matches. And by the turn of the millennium, the Eels of 2001 to 2002 boasted a 3 consecutive match scoreline over the Panthers of 158 to 38. Penrith then enjoyed their own 3-match winning streak from 2003 to 2004, and since then things have been relatively back and forth between the two. Neither side has been particularly dominant in the competition since then, save for an Eels minor premiership in 2005. But by the 2020s, things had changed. The Eels looked like they were top 4 material, and Penrith began challenging for the premiership, with the two sides now considered premiership heavyweights, seemingly putting on a classic match every time they play. The Eels nabbed a dramatic 16-10 win in 2020, which would be the last time Penrith would lose until the finals of that year. Then in 2021, when the two sides both fielded full-strength squads, they could only be separated by a total of 3 points. You had a missed Mitchell Moses penalty goal, and then the 2-point win by Penrith in the knockout semi-final. And throughout all of that, Penrith amassed a 21-match unbeaten run at home. And that was until round 9 of the 2022 season, when the Eels managed to breach the fortress and become the first team in 3 years to beat the Panthers on their own turf. So here's how they did it. First, we'll get through some basics. The Eels had 54% of possession to 46% against Penrith. They completed at 85%, while Penrith were at a low of 78%. And some notes on that. That possession is bang on average for Parramatta. They've actually been pretty good with their ball control this season. Previously, they've been a little bit below that. But it's low for Penrith. Their average is 53% of possession. And Parramatta's completion rate was up 3% compared to normal, and Penrith's was down 3%. Possession and completions, though, are only part of the story when you're looking at a win and a loss during a match. But you need to be holding the ball well and getting up the field decently well to beat Penrith. And the story of the match also wasn't really one of attack, but of some very committed goal line defence. The Eels had more play the balls in the opposition 20 at 32 to 23, and play the balls in the opponent's half was about the same, with the Eels at 67 and Penrith at 65. But here's something interesting though. Parramatta had to kick for nearly double the metres than Penrith, 933 metres to 505. And that tracks with Penrith's territory of 64%, meaning they played nearly 2/3 of the game in Parramatta's half, whether they had the ball themselves or were belting the Eels down their own end. But here's something that's a little un-Penrith-like. They struggled to generate sustained periods of possession. Only 3 occasions when they managed 3 consecutive sets, and all of those periods included tries. So they had a set, they scored, they got the kick-off and managed another set. But they didn't go beyond that. And generally Penrith liked to control the opposition down the other end of the field and slowly but surely tighten the noose during the game, with Nathan Cleary's kicking game coming to the fore and basically choking their opponents out of the match. And this didn't happen in this Parramatta game. Parramatta, though, they managed 4 occasions of 3 sets or more, and on one occasion they had 4 consecutive sets, and another they had 6 consecutive sets. And the period with 6 sets resulted in 2 tries. Parramatta's big focus throughout the game as well was offloads. They managed 17 during this match. Repeated efforts from a defensive side, regardless of how good they are, and regardless if they're as good as Penrith, they're eventually going to cause exhaustion and disorganisation. We're going to get into that in a moment. And Parramatta also found a way to unsettle Dylan Edwards, and it's not the first time they've managed that. But first, let's take a look at Parramatta's first try. The try itself is fairly mundane in the end, with Penasini just starting out from dummy half, overpowering the defenders and offloading to Clint Gutherson. Now keep in mind, Gutherson was the man who played the ball. If you go back to the 1980s and Phil Gould's day when he was a head coach, the man playing the ball, scoring a try on the next tackle, earned himself a keg. So, Gus, I guess you owe Clint a keg. But it's the lead-up work that gets us to this point. The Eels get a crack at Penrith's line because of Jerome Luai's dumb penalty on Reid Marnie. And I'm just going to mention something here. Jerome Luai, for some reason, seems to draw attention to himself quite often during matches. He takes attacking players out of play, or he interferes in the ruck with defenders. And this has happened a couple of times this year. Earlier in the year when they played South Sydney, he was called out by the referee, I believe it was Ashley Klein, for pulling a defender out of the ruck and causing a mess in the ruck. And he got penalised for that. So it's something that Penrith might want to be a little concerned about as the year progresses. You don't want to be giving away dumb penalties that aren't required. I mean, he grabbed Marnie off the ball. Marnie wasn't doing anything. But the penalty led to Parramatta's possession down there into the field and ultimately led to their try. So it's a fairly benign attacking set, and Parramatta just simply work from edge to edge. And they've got one of the best offloaders in the game, though, in Junior Barlow. And it's this type of player that, if you actually look a little bit before Penrith's dominance and you look at Melbourne's old defensive structures, the teams that they hated playing against were teams they could offload. And the Warriors managed to find a way to do this during final series. And despite how good Melbourne's defensive unit was, like I said before, if you offload the ball enough, and they're effective offloads, I'm not talking about a Kane Evans drop the ball out the back and hope a teammate's there. I'm talking passing the ball to a teammate in a better position after committing 2, 3 or 4 defenders to the tackle and then exploiting the space in the defensive line. Barlow, he averages 2 offloads per game, which puts him at 11th in the competition. He's actually 8th if you remove single game players like Edric Lee, Tom Flegler and Christian Welch. And that unsettles a very organised Penrith defensive line, and it gives Dylan Brown room on the left edge, and that's his favourite spot to attack. If you've seen earlier in the year, Dylan Brown likes to get that ball on the edge of a bit of room where he can skip to the outside of his opposite defender's shoulder and then try and isolate his back rower, which is generally Sean Lane, onto the opposition's half. Poorer teams in this situation probably get shredded here, but Penrith is well drilled enough and well organised enough in their defence to manage to cover up the issue here. It's a very good job here by Nathan Cleary to push across from the inside and shut down Dylan Brown. But the Eels then decide they're going to set up, they're going to go back to their right-hand side. They have a settler through Nathan Brown in the middle, which I'm just going to say is a bit annoying as an Eels fan. They sometimes need to shift the ball a bit faster rather than chewing up what is often a bit of a disorganised ruck through the middle. However, on this occasion, they go to their right edge, and Isaiah Papali'i with a nice little unders line almost crashes through it. It's only a kind of desperate tackle from Dylan Edwards, which is actually quite a good textbook defensive tackle, to bring Papali'i down short of the line against probably a less organised defence or a less committed fullback. Papali'i goes through to score here. Then on the next tackle, Junior Barlow fills in on the right edge. Now, this is a very unfamiliar spot for most props, but if you watch Parramatta a lot, he does this quite often, both on the left edge and the right edge. He basically plays as a wide running back rower, but he's a huge prop, and he uses his size and his strength here, where he isolates Jerome Luai, and rather than just try and barge over him, he basically just holds Luai off with one side of his body and pops an offload out to Clint Gutherson. And that's Barlow's second offload of the set, and it's something the Eels like to do a lot. Whilst he offloads to Gutherson, quite often the Eels actually use Barlow as a wraparound, and it's sometimes Reid Marnie, sometimes Mitchell Moses, where they can use kind of their speed, or they can isolate a bigger man in the defensive line, take him out using Barlow, and then take advantage of the space that creates. This time though, Penrith managed to scramble and bring Gutherson down just short of the line. But again, their left edge is disorganised. They all swing back to the right edge, expecting a trademark Parramatta shift to their left edge, where they've got all their players lined out. And generally, this is where the ball's going to go. I mean, it's last tackle, so you'd expect the ball to go that way. However, Will Penasini decides to take a dig from quite short range, and using his power and his strength, he manages to overpower 3 of Penrith's defenders and pop the offload to Clint Gutherson, who scores in the right corner. And as I said, while it wasn't the most free-flowing, threatening attacking set the Eels could put together, it did highlight what they're trying to do, and that is move the Penrith pack around and generate second phase play to disorganise their defence. Now, for the second try we're going to look at the kick that isn't fielded by Dylan Edwards and it ended up being scored by Dylan Brown. And it's actually something we've seen before Parramatta utilise against Penrith. I'm going to take you back to round 16 in 2021, and the Eels scored a similar try against Charlie Staines at fullback, who was unwilling to contest a bomb. And I'm pretty sure it was the first set after the halftime break, and on that occasion it was Isaiah Papali'i following through the kick and scoring under the posts. This kick was slightly deeper, and you could say Staines was at a lot more fault here than Edwards is for this try. He really should have just competed for the ball and tried to catch it, but for some reason he lets it bounce and pays the ultimate price. Bringing you back through to 2022, and just before we get into actually looking at the try, just a little bit of a stats break here. The Eels managed to, on 2 separate occasions, score back-to-back tries against Penrith. They're the only side in the competition to do that this year, and only 2 other sides have managed to score back-to-back tries at all so far this year. And so it's obviously a very important thing to do is either draw level with Penrith or get ahead of them and force them to chase the game. You don't want to be always coming from behind, because Nathan Cleary's kicking game and their control of the ball quite often is too good to try and come from behind against. This try that he scored off the kick comes about from an entire set which is disruptive to Penrith's defensive pattern. So off the kickoff, Barlow returns the kick. Now, as you can see, Penrith get their 3 men in the tackle. They look to drive him backwards, but he pops an offload to Clint Gutherson, who steals an extra 10 metres. So they go from dominating Barlow and driving him backwards to now having to get back on side because they've conceded an extra 10 metres. And just again highlights what Parramatta were trying to do in trying to counteract Penrith's very physical defensive structure. On the next tackle, they go towards the middle, and Isaiah Papali'i trucks the ball forward. And Papali'i, again, we saw it last year, we're seeing it again this year. He's an incredibly powerful ball runner and very hard to bring down one-on-one. So he keeps the set rolling forward with a nice strong carry, and he keeps Penrith's defensive line on the back foot. Then we've got Regan Campbell-Gillard. He's not exactly going to get driven backwards. They try to. He kind of gets pulled to a standstill, but he's not brought to ground properly, so he can get a quick play the ball. So again, the Eels then go to their right edge, and it's Barlow again involved. This time he's playing short at the line, and he isolates Papali'i onto Jerome Luai on the edge, who ends up getting some help from Isaiah Yeo over the top. But again, it's a legs tackle from Luai, which then brings about a fast play the ball. The next player to run the ball, well, that's Nathan Brown. So keep in mind, the Eels have been able to roll through almost their entire forward pack with this set. They haven't even gone to their left edge, who at this point in time is Ryan Madison. So they've either stayed in the middle or they've gone to their right edge. And Isaiah Papali'i has been involved on 2 of those runs, and so is Junior Barlow, either through the offload the first time or the tip on this tackle 4. So at this point in time, Nathan Brown then arrows in behind the ruck, which he's very good at. He's probably one of the best locks in the game at coming off the long run and then using some footwork to get back in behind the ruck and forcing the A defenders to work hard again. And the Eels have gone from 5 tackles, they've made nearly 60 metres in the set, which is rare against Penrith. Penrith don't give up metres easily, but the Eels have managed to roll them down their own left edge or the Parramatta's right edge. And it's something that Eels, when they're going well, they do this very well. And that is they target an entire edge for a set and exhaust the defenders. What they've done also is they've put away the long shifts. Parramatta love a long shift, but as Peter Sterling has always said, you've got to earn the right to do that. And here the Eels put that away and they use their short passing game. They've got good forwards with good hands, able to isolate defenders and win quick play the balls, which even when you're Penrith is hard to defend against. Now let's go to the kick, its last tackle, and because of Parramatta's really good attacking set, Penrith don't have a lot of kick pressure on him. Mitch Kenny kind of gets there, but it's not the pressure they're looking for. Kind of by the time he gets in shot, Moses has already kicked the ball, so he's not really feeling the pressure. And whilst it looks like a missed kick, it's not really, because Edwards has spent most of the game fielding the ball either near his goal line or Moses has spent it kicking the ball as far as he can. So Edwards isn't expecting a kick to land closer to the Parramatta kick chase than it has all night, but on this occasion it does. And if you look here at this shot, the ball has hit its highest point and you can't see Edwards anywhere in the shot. It's going to land around the 30 metre line, and really you'd want the fullback in shot on this occasion. He's not there, and as we roll through, the ball bounces, it gets a good bounce for Dylan Brown, and Edwards can't make up the distance, and Brown swoops on it to score and hand Parramatta what turns out to be their match-winning lead for the night. So Parramatta showed the way to beat Penrith, and as we saw during the round 10 clash in Magic Round, it's not an easy thing to do. Now, granted, Melbourne were missing some pretty key players in that game, but again, it's not good enough to just control the ball against Penrith or even control field position. You've got to have the ability to score points against a very organised defensive line. And Parramatta showed that with a mobile forward pack that is still keen to get into the brutal collisions that Penrith look for, you can take it to them and you can ultimately beat them, but you need to put them under pressure and you need to put them under continuous scoreboard pressure, which Parramatta did. So if the Eels can operate at a similar level during the season and then into the finals, they will be premiership contenders, but there's a long way to go. If you like this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to help the channel. I will catch you guys next time.